Okay, so our story starts up in the village of Iga, right? Iga is a village in Japan, and this guy is a village in Japan, right? So the main character of the story, her name is Tokyo, spelled Tokyo, right? And Tokyo, because the story, she's getting married to Tariku, right? Now, Tariku is the son of the chief of the samurais, right? So he's the son of the chief of the samurais, and because he's the son of the chief of the samurais, he could basically just like he could pick. He was asked to pick a bride essentially, and because Tokyo was the finest girl in the whole village of Iga, he decided to like pick Tokyo to be his bride. Now Tokyo didn't really like it. She wasn't really dating anybody at the time, but she didn't really like it. And because this was during the Sengoku period in Japan, she didn't really have much of a say in the matter. And again, because Tariku was the son of like the chief of the samurais, her parents were in a hurry to like marry them off, right? So our parents like rushed, essentially they rushed the wedding before Tariku changed his mind, essentially. So let's say Tariku's parents came to ask for Tokyo's hand in marriage like on Thursday, right? The next Friday, they were already the wedding day was already fixed for the next Friday. So let's fast forward to the wedding day. So the wedding day, Friday, the village square, the village square of Iga was like packed with all like the important personalities, all the samurais, because the son of the chief of the samurai, Tariku, was getting married, right? So everybody was there, every single person was there. The only people that were missing were like, children and some guards that were just left to like watch the post of the city. Those are only people that were a few guards actually, but everybody, the who is who of the village of Iga, they were there. In fact, some people traveled from some like nearby villages to attend the wedding. It was like a very big feast, right? Okay, cool. Now Tokyo wasn't very giddy about the whole wedding because number one, she didn't really hate Tariku, but she didn't like him either, right? But this was again, like I said, Sengoku Japan, right? So the Sengoku period in Japan, right? So she didn't have much of a choice in the matter. And then, her mother told her that, she would eventually get used to liking him because she also was married off. She also was married to like an arranged marriage, essentially. So they were at the wedding, and Tariku's dad was everybody was merry, everybody was happy, and then Tariku's uncle, his favorite uncle, decided to like surprise everybody, right, by showing up at the wedding. Now Tokyo didn't know Tariku's uncle, right, because she barely knew Tariku himself, right? Talk less of his uncle. So when the guy showed up, Tariku was very excited. He was super excited. It kind of like, his uncle kind of like added like he added like infused life into the wedding essentially. So they were already married before, but when his uncle arrived, it was like the best day of his life, right? Okay, cool. Okay, so his uncle sat down. So he introduced his uncle to Tokyo, and Tokyo stood up and wanted to serve his uncle wine, right? But because Tariku was very excited, Tariku was like, Tokyo shouldn't bother serving his uncle wine. That there was this wine that he had kept for himself, actually. He kept it for himself and Tokyo because, for himself and his wife when he got married. So he had been keeping the wine for 7 years, right? He had been keeping the wine for 7 years, right? So his plan was that when him and Tokyo got home, they would drink the wine essentially to commemorate their wedding. You grab, right? But because his uncle was around, he was so excited. He was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let me go home, grab the wine. I'll come back and give it to my uncle. Like, he was that excited about his uncle showing up at the wedding because he hadn't seen that uncle since he was like a child, right? Okay, cool. So he took permission from his dad. And his dad was because his dad was like a military person, right? His dad asked him that should he like send a couple of guards to follow him home. And he was like, Tariku was pissed off. He was like, why would his dad send like guards to follow him home? That this is the problem he has with his dad, that his dad is constantly trying to baby him, that he's like an adult, for God's sake. It was almost like turning causing a scene at the wedding. So his dad was like, okay. So he signaled to the guards to not follow him. But everywhere Tariku went, the guards would follow him because, again, he was the son of the head of the samurais, right? Okay, cool. The son of the chief of the head of the samurais, essentially, right? So Tariku kissed Tokio on the cheeks and told her that he'll be back in less than 10 minutes because his house, or their new house, was about a stone throw from the village square, right? So he decided to Tokio on the other hand, she couldn't care less, right? She was not very happy, she wasn't very sad, but she had to put up this very she would occasionally fall into this like very sad face, but her mom was looking at her, so her mom would like wink to her, so she had to like, put up this very smiley face. So anytime you saw her mom, she had to like reconfigure her face and put on this like very smiley face so that the guests would think that she's happy, yada yada yada. So she was like pretending like she was happy, essentially. So Tariku grabbed her, he kissed her, she kissed him too, and then she pretended that she didn't want him to go, and everybody in the wedding was like, oh. And then eventually she left. Eventually Tariku left. And then 10 minutes passed and Tariku did not come back. 15 minutes passed, Tariku did not come back. 20 minutes, no sign of Tariku. 30 minutes, no Tariku. An hour, no Tariku. So at this point, like, his father was like, Tariku's dad was very worried, right? But again, he didn't want to send the guards because if he sends the guards to Tariku, and Tariku, he could scatter the wedding. It'd be like his dad is trying to baby him, yada, yada, yada. So Tariku's dad sent Tariku's uncle. He told his uncle to go and check out Tariku and see what he was doing. To check out Tariku and see what he was doing. But the problem was that the uncle didn't know where Tariku's new house was, right? So the uncle said that he should go with Tokio. So Tokio will show them their new house, and then the three of them, Tokio, Tariku, and his uncle, the three of them will come back together, back to the wedding feast, right? Okay, cool. So Tokio got up from the wedding, told her mom that she'd be back very quickly, and then she and Tariku's uncle went to Tariku's house. Now, when they started approaching the house, the noise from the wedding was so loud, and all the drums that they were playing and all the music, that the merriment was so very loud that they literally could not hear anything up until when they were like 2 or 3 minutes to like their new house. Like I said, Tariku's new house was like 10 minutes away from the village square, right? So the noise from the village square was so loud that they literally could not even hear a conversation between each other, right? Until they were like 2 minutes to the house. So eventually, when they approached the house, they noticed that like all the lights in that part of the city was out, right? Which was very, very strange because usually, it was only mostly children that were left that did not attend the wedding. Literally everybody was at the wedding, but at the same time, all the children would not like go to bed and turn off the lights like that. Because, children usually, they are happy when their parents are not around and there's nobody to enforce a night out. So they are supposed to like take advantage of it, right? So Tokio's uncle, so Tariku's uncle, so Tokio told Tariku's uncle like the weird observation that she heard that all the lights were out, nobody was there, and all the kids were sleeping. That's like very, very strange. But she said it like in a joking manner, right? But Tariku's uncle like kind of like he took it seriously because it was already on edge, right? It was already on edge, right? So he was like, okay, Tariku has been gone for an hour. Now all the lights of the village is off. That that Tokio should just proceed. That he would wait here. That Tokio should proceed to go and fetch Tariku, and then he will check out. He will knock on one of the houses to find out why all the kids were asleep, right? So Tokio was like, okay. So Tariku's uncle stayed behind, and then Tokio again. It was like a stone throw to her house, right? So she walked to the house. When she entered the house, she didn't see Tariku inside the house. She saw the wine. She saw Tariku's clothes, like his full clothes, right? His full wedding regalia was like neatly stacked beside the jar of wine. But she didn't see Tariku, which was very weird. Like, so she thought maybe he went to like take a bath. Now, the bath house was like attached to the house, right? It was not kind of attached to the house. It was like kind of like detached from the house. It was like another minute walk away from the house. So she was like, oh, maybe he went to take a bath, right? So decided to go to the bathhouse. And then when she got to the bathhouse, lo and behold, she saw Tariq, who had been like he had been speared through the wall. Essentially, he was dead and he was bleeding, with like a sword, like a katana, what had speared him and pinned him to the door of the bathhouse. So she opened the door of the bathhouse, and lo and behold, it was Tariq that was hanging on the door with a katana through his chest. So she, of course, she screamed. She started screaming, ah, ah, ah. She started screaming, ah, ah, ah. And she was screaming, and she was screaming, and she was screaming, right? So in her mind, right, she ran, right? So she was screaming. She was in shock for like a whole 3-4 minutes. She was just shouting there, right? So when she kind of like semi came to her senses, you know, her mind was like she should go and get Tariq's uncle, right, to come and help her. And then she ran back to she was running, she was screaming and running, right? And she got back to the spot where she left Tariq's uncle, and lo and behold, whose body was on the floor? It was Tariq's uncle's body on the floor, with again a katana stabbed through his chest, right? So apparently what was happening was that, so she started shouting. So apparently what was happening was that the village was crawling with shinobi, right? There was this war, again, like I said, this Sengoku period. There was a village, there was a big village, which was, I've forgotten. So there was a big village that was crawling with, like, the big village had like a lot of like samurai. It had a lot of shinobi, right? And then Tariq's village was like, which was Iga. Well, Tokyo's village, which was Iga, had like a lot of samurais, right? Now samurai and shinobi didn't like really see eye to eye, because like shinobis were they believed in stealth. They believed in, like, you know, sneaking up on you and killing you. Samurais, on the other hand, believed in like they believed in honor. They believed in, like, you know, if you're going to kill someone, give them their respect, you know. And a man should always die like a man, if you will. So there was always that conflict, right? So the shinobi heard that, essentially the village of the shinobi, right, heard that the village of the samurais, right, Iga, was going to be there was going to be a wedding. There was this impromptu wedding. So they decided to like launch an impromptu attack to take advantage of the impromptu wedding. So that's essentially what's happening, right? So by the time, so again, Tokyo saw Tariq's uncle's body lying lifeless on the streets with a lot of blood everywhere. So she saw that her shouting even increased, and then she started running towards the village square, right? And by the time she got to but because, you know, there was so much like blood, right? There was so much, she was such in a state of shock that she fell down and passed out, essentially. She fainted just when she was about to get to the village square. She had already started seeing the lights of the village square, but the problem was that she was not seeing just lights now. She was seeing flames. She remembered seeing, you know, it was flames, right? So she fainted, right? She passed out, and then when she woke up, it was morning, right? But this time she was woken by the smell of like soot and smoke and burned human flesh, right? And then she got up, and she wanted to pretend like what happened the other day was what happened was just like a bad dream, right? Immediately she woke up, so she stood up, and then she turned, and then she looked, and then she saw the village square, and everything was in flames, and there was just smoke rising from it, right? So again, she collapsed again, and she passed out. So eventually, she was woken up again, but by this time she wasn't woken up by herself. She was woken up by Sakura. She was woken up by a girl, Sakura. Now Sakura was like, so Tokyo was like, she was like what you call like a school teacher. You know, it's all Sengoku period in Japan, right? So she was like a school teacher, but it wasn't like So the way the village worked was like the men were supposed to grow up to become samurai, right? So their school was to train as a samurai, and the women was supposed to grow up and train out to be good wives, right? So Tokyo was like not only the finest girl in the village, but she was also very good at baking rice cakes, onigiri essentially, right? She's very good at making rice cakes, onigiri. So there are some kids that were like, the girls in the village like took a liking to her because they wanted to grow up to be, she was like their role model essentially. So they would go to her house to learn how to make rice cakes essentially. So she was like a teacher-ish. It wasn't official, but she was like a teacher, right? Okay, cool. So one of our favorite students, her name was Sakura, right? So Sakura was the one that woke her up, right? So she woke up to Sakura, and Sakura was crying. And then Sakura told her that she kind of like gave her the whole nine that, you know, Shinobi invaded the village. They killed all the men. They killed everybody. They literally killed everybody. But Sakura managed to escape. And she and like 6 of our other friends, they managed to escape, right? And they were hiding in, there was a house at the outpost of the village where she managed to like escape with her friends too. So once again Tokyo screamed and then she fainted again. You know, just imagine that Miss Rabbit has fainted. Miss Rabbit has fainted, something like that. So like third time, right? But eventually she came around, and Sakura led her to like the village outpost, right? The outpost where the 6 other girls were like hiding, where they were being kept. Their names are so I did ask ChatGPT to give me like the names of 7 popular Japanese female names. So here are the names: Sakura, Yuki, Ikari, Aoi, Rin, Mio, Haruka. Okay, those are the 7 names of the girls, right? But we're talking with Sakura here. Okay, cool. Sakura told Tokyo that they could not stay in the village because the shinobi, they had gone, they were not just trying to kill like the samurai village. That was not of Iga. No, it was like a full takeover. Like they just wanted to exterminate anything that was like samurai, right? Any samurai village they could find, right? So they had gone inland. Now Iga was like at least at that time, right? The region was very large. So Iga was like was a coastal town, right? So they had gone inland to go and raid more villages, right? So Sakura told Tokyo that the shinobi, they had gone inland to like raid more villages and they'll be coming back. So they could not stay in the village. They had to get out of there, right? Okay, cool. So they tried to, and the only way out was through, they could not go inland because they would, of course, encounter the shinobi, right? So they had to escape outside. They had to like go through the waters, right? But the problem was, how are they going to like escape through the water, right? So when I got to the coast, they saw like the coast was lined with like boats from like the village, from the shinobi, like shinobi boats, right? There was just like all sorts of boats there. There are all sorts of boats. I'm trying to find the name of the village. Osaka. Okay, cool. Let's say the name of the village of the shinobi is Osaka, right? So the shinobis are from a village called Osaka in Japan, right? Okay, cool. So they saw all these boats with the flag of Osaka flying high, right? So they knew automatically they were like shinobi boats, right? But there was this weird like one boat that was just aloof. It wasn't docked to the shore, right? It was just kind of like aloof, right? So they were like, you know what? Let's swim to that boat. If we get that boat, doesn't seem to be like a shinobi boat, and it was kind of like big. So and there was still some like shinobi inside those boats, like the shinobi boats. A few shinobi were there, but it wasn't a lot, right? And it was dark. At this point, it was dark, right? It was morning this time, right? So they had to wait till evening, nighttime before they. So Tokyo told the girls, right, that they were going to. Their plan was to get the boat that was. It was like a ship. It was like a mini ship, right? That was adrift on the water. And bring it back, and then she would take all the girls on it, and then they would sail somewhere else. they'll find somewhere else to sail to, right? But they couldn't do that because it was morning, right? And it was daylight. So they said they were going to wait for the night to fall, and then they were sneaking on the boat, and then they'll bring the boat back, because she couldn't tell the 7 girls to like swim, right? They could not swim. Most of them could not swim. The only person that could swim was her, Tokyo, and Sakura, right? So when nightfall came, the shinobi, of course, they were in high spirits because they heard that their fellow shinobi had run over the village of Iga, and they were like pillaging all these like smaller villages essentially. They were pillaging all the smaller villages essentially. So they just went to sleep. They had a lot of wine to drink, and then they went to sleep. So so Tokyo and Sakura snuck past them, entered the water, and then they gently swam to the boat that was like, afloat on the water, right? So when they got to that ship, they entered the ship, and they gently paddled the ship. They were very gentle because they didn't want to like cause like enough ripples that would like rock the boat of the shinobi boat essentially. So it was like a very snail pace. So for instance, right, they got on the boat around 10 p.m. at night. I said that the shinobi, they had a lot to drink. They were in high spirits, so they slept very early. So they got on the boat around 10 p.m., right? And the boat wasn't very far. It was just like a few, like 200 yards away from shore, right? 200 meters away from shore. But it took them literally like 4 hours to get the boat from that 200 meters to shore, right? Because they were paddling, just small, just to make sure they don't wake. They couldn't take chances, just to make sure they don't wake the shinobis, right? So eventually they got the boat to shore. Sakura boarded the boat. Sakura took the 6 other girls, and all of them sailed. Again, they had to be careful to sail away, right? So that took them another like 7 hours, right? So, but luckily they were able to do it. So by the time morning came, they could still see their desolate village from a distance, but they were safe in quotes, right? So they were on water, they were adrift, and then they quickly discovered that. So Tokyo decided to like explore the ship, right? She decided to like check out the ship, and then she discovered that the ship actually belonged to a man called Xavier Francis, which was like an English missionary that had come to a popular English missionary actually that came to evangelize in Japan during the Zenkoku period. So it was a ship essentially. So when they got on the ship, they found like a basket of rice cakes. They found like a bed for one person. The ship was essentially built for one person. It was built for only him, right? But there were 6 of them, right? So, but lucky enough, there was enough onigiri on board for like to last for the girls to eat, right? But it wasn't going to last there for more than 2 days, essentially, right? So they took the boats, and then they decided to start sailing, and they were just drifting because they didn't have a map. They were just drifting, and it was kind of windy too. So Sakura didn't have people to help out with the sails of the ship because it was just Tokyo didn't have people to help out with the sails of the ship because it was just her and Sakura. Let me just get to the end of the story. Okay, cool. So eventually, to cut the long story short, the shinobi, they spent 3 days at sea, right? So eventually, the shinobi forces had already finished their conquest of the villages, all the samurai villages, and they were returning, right? And then they met them on the water. So initially, they thought the Sakura told all the kids to hide. They hid. So initially, the shinobi thought that the boat belonged to. Initially, the shinobi thought that the boat belonged to the missionary, but eventually they discovered that the boat was actually belonged to. It wasn't the missionary that was on board. It was like Sakura, and it was Tokyo and Sakura and all this like Tokyo and 7 little children that was on board, right? So they drew the both in, and then they brought Tokyo and the 7 girls before like the chief of the shinobi village, right? Now again, this is shinobi. They don't play by rules. They don't play nice. So when the chief saw the girls, it was like, that, he just wanted to take them as a bride, essentially. He wanted to get married to them, essentially, right? And they were very young. They were like 8 or 9 years old, right? He wanted to get married to them. So Tokyo was like, so he told his men that they should like prepare the girls for like marriage. Like as soon as they get to shore, they get back to Osaka, he was going to get married to the 7 girls, right? So, but Tokyo pleaded with him and told him that she lied. Actually, she told him that she had like that she was from a very rich home, and she didn't tell them that she was from like Iga. She lied that she was from another village outside of Iga, and that dad was like a merchant, a rich merchant, and that she had like a lot of money, and if only the head of the shinobi village of Osaka would just allow her to like give her like 14 days, right? She would return like with she would return with a merchant ship full of gold, and he could have any girl like he should forget all these 7 girls. Like he could have any girl that he wanted, any woman that he wanted. It would make him very, very rich, right? So she said that she was from a village in China, right? So her dad was like very, very rich, right? Okay, cool. So the initial thought of the head of the shinobi was for them to go and raid the village. But when she mentioned that the village was from like a village in China, right? He knew that they are just like, he didn't want to push his luck essentially. They are just like raided these like shinobi, these samurai villages, and his men were in high spirits. He didn't want to like lead them into another war for the promise of like, quote and unquote gold, right? Because the speculative gold essentially. So he was like, okay. So he agreed to the deal. He was like, okay, he would let Tokyo go, and he would give her like 14 days. If at the end of 14 days she did not come back with the gold, he was going to get married to the girls. So Tokyo was like, okay. But Tokyo asked for like so Tokyo lied that all those girls were like her little sisters, and they were princesses from, like I said, from that merchant's village, right? From that merchant village in China. Right. So Tokyo told him that in order for her to be able to like take as much gold as possible, and she would need help on the ship, right? So the head of the samurai agreed that Tokyo should go with like Aoi and Sakura. So Tokyo, Aoi, and Sakura boarded, and then he gave her like this very big ship, so that you have like enough like space for gold essentially. So she took this very big ship. They had like a lot of supplies on it, and then Tokyo set sail, right? And Tokyo's act was so convincing that the head of the shinobi, he didn't doubt her for a second. He was so convinced that she was from this village. I'm rushing the story, by the way. I could have gone into like detail about all these things, right? Okay, but you catch my drift, right? So I was so happy that the head of the village, he was so happy essentially that he was going to get, he had just conquered this shinobi village, these samurai villages, and now he's going to get more gold too. So, but Tokyo was kind of sad essentially, because it was a lie. She knew it was a lie, right? But at the same time, she didn't just want to escape with the 2 girls, right? She needed to come back and save these other 2 girls, right? But where was she going to get all that gold from? So once again, she set sail with Sakura and Aoi, right? And they were in the boat, and they were drifting away. Sorry, let me see how much time we have. Wow, we're already 30 minutes in. Okay, sorry, I'm going to like speed up the story now, right? Okay, cool. So in all her sorrow, she was very sad. Tokyo was very sad. The 2 girls were very sad. She was just there. She was very, very sad. She didn't know what to do. And then, but Sakura had a bright idea. Sakura was like, okay, since they are just pillaged their village. The shinobi are just raided all the samurai villages. That the samurai villages would be desolate, right? But if they went back to those villages, if they sailed back to one of those villages, they could find some scraps, some stuff that they could steal in quotes, and then they could take those things to the village of another village and find valuable stuff and sell it. If they found valuable stuff, that they must have taken that the shinobis must have taken most of the valuable stuff, but they might still find some valuable stuff. If they did a thorough search through all the villages, all the 7 shinobi samurai villages that were raided, that they were going to find at least some valuable stuff, and they will be able to fill their ship with some of those valuable stuff, and then bring it back and then go and sell it, and then whatever money they were able to make from it, they'll bring it back to the shinobi king, or the king of Osaka, essentially, and then buy everybody's freedom, right? So Tokyo was like, why didn't I think of that? So they decided to go back to their villages, essentially, but they were too emotional because they could not go back home because they were too attached to their house, essentially. So they couldn't go back home. So instead, they set sail for another village, a village that was close to their village. The village was called the village of Koga, right? So they decided to sail for Koga, right? So when they got to Koga, again, Koga was desolate. It was stinking. There were dead bodies everywhere. It was stinking, right? But they discovered that the stench from Koga was slightly different. Now, Koga was inland. Koga was not was very, very far inland, right? So they docked at the shore, and they had to trek for 6 days, essentially. They had to trek for 6 days before they got to Koga, essentially. So when they got to Koga, they discovered that most of the bodies the corpses there was smelling, but they were approaching the village, they discovered that it was stinking. But the stench was not just the stench of corpses. It was the stench of corpses and something. It was something else that was stinking there, right? So as they got closer, they discovered that the smell of salmon, essentially. Or sorry, I don't know. What's the best fish they like in Japan? Salmon. Let's just say salmon. The stench of salmon was very strong. Sorry, give me a second. Okay, cool. So they discovered that it was the smell of fish, right? It wasn't just corpses now; it was fish. So when they entered the village, they saw that the village was littered with fish. They could barely put their feet on the floor. But it wasn't just any type of fish. It was this very rare breed of fish called tai. Now, tai is red-brimmed fish, right? Now, tai was a symbol of nobility in Japan, right? It was this symbol of nobility, this symbol of it was a very sought-after fish, right? And now they saw millions of it on the floor. It was just everywhere, right? So when they saw it, they could not believe their luck. They were very, very happy. They could not believe their luck. And so they were very happy, So they started, packing as much fish as they could. They started packing as much fish as they could. But there was just not enough fish for them to carry, essentially. So, and you remember I said that the village was the village was 6 days away from shore, right? So very quickly, their excitement was went with sorrow when they realized that they could not possibly transport all the kai fish they needed, right? To shore. By the time they got to shore with the kai fish would have spoiled, right? Okay, cool. So again, they started crying, and then they were crying, and then then Aoi and Sakura and Tokyo decided to sleep again, and then they slept. It was night, so they slept. Now, by the time they woke up again, they were covered in fish this time. There was fish, even more fish everywhere. So apparently, the sky was fish was actually literally falling from the sky. Instead of getting rain, it was fish that was raining, literally, right? So overnight, another rain of fish had been deposited there. So they quickly discovered that So there was this. So the explanation for this is that there's like a tsunami that was like bringing the fish, raining the fish down to them essentially. In that part of in that part. Sorry, like a quick note. So in the pre-draft of this story is actually based on like this idea that like fish, in the 1800s in America, meat fell from the sky essentially. There was a rain of meat, and then in the 2000s, right? In the 2000s, there was like this rain of fish. Now the scientific explanation for it is that is a tornado that brought all the fish and flung them into and caused it to rain from the sky. Okay. So is that true? Like I said, I don't know. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I just care about narrative, right? So we're taking that narrative and we're using it in this story here. So back to the story. So essentially it was Thai fish that had rained. So they discovered that, it was literally raining fish here. So instead of trying to like transport the fish, right? Aoi, not Sakura or Tokyo this time, had like an idea, because our dad was like we have to round up, it's 36 minutes. Our dad was like he was a samurai, but it was like a mercenary samurai, right? And they used to travel from village to village, and they would hunt like the villages would pay them, and they would hunt if there was like a wolf or like an animal disturbing the village, our dad would be the one to kill it essentially. So our dad was like a mercenary. So our dad was very familiar. So there was this village of mercenaries essentially it was like 2 days away from Ikoga, right? And which was the village they were in. But the village was filled with mercenaries, right? So, but the problem with those mercenaries is that the only thing they cared about was money. They did not care about, you couldn't go to them and say, our village was invaded, please come and like help us. They didn't care about humanity, just cared about money, right? So, Aoi told Sakura and Tokyo about the village of mercenaries, and told him that, look, we have all these fish, we can sail to that village, tell them about all this fish that is raining, and then use it as like that village of Ikogi, sorry, it wasn't 2 days, it was like 2 hours. I'm going to say 2 hours. It was like 2 hours away from where they were, right? So it was easy to transport all that fish, right? So they went inside the village and they packed as much carts they stocked as much carts with as much fish as they could, and then it took them about like another 2 days to like move all those carts out of the village, right? So they dragged all those carts out of the village, and they had like this like about 200 carts filled with like fish, right? So they went to the village of to the mercenary village, and they hired some mercenaries. I'm rushing now. I'm sorry, I have to go. So they went to the mercenary village, and they had some mercenaries, and they paid them in fish essentially. So they took those mercenaries, and then they returned back to shore. And by the time I got to shore, though, it was a once in a life. This raining of like fish was like a once in a lifetime event, right? So by the time they got back to the Kogi village, most of the good fish was already in the cart, and it was just bad fish that was there. So it wasn't raining fish anymore, right? Okay, cool. So they essentially paid the mercenaries with the fish, and then they sailed back to Osaka, and they waged war against Osaka, and then they defeated Osaka, and they got Sakura, Aoi, and Tokyo. They were united with their with girls that were kidnapped, and they lived happily ever after. Right, the end. So the name of the story is called The Fish Market. Right. I'm sorry, I could have really gone deep inside the story, but like I have to go. It's 38 minutes already. The end.